Okay, I'm going to talk as I work right now, cleaning out my truck. Got a bunch of crap in here. I'm trying to straighten out here. This is what happens if you don't organize your string and rope in the back of a van, right? But let's get on to the real subject inside of 30 seconds. I want to talk about quality of people and the prepper lifestyle. And, you know, we talk a lot about shit hit the fan and big volume type stuff. You know, alien invasion, zombie apocalypse, all those types of big things. But we also need to look into the fact that little disasters can happen in our lives on a daily basis. And I just had a really bad, disturbing phone conversation with a good friend of mine out of state, somebody I've known basically only on the internet over the years. And shit hit the fan for him personally in late February, and we didn't fully realize what was going on. He just kind of posted in one of the forums, pray for me, I've had some health issues, and that was toward the middle of February, and we kind of were active in the forum, and then kind of noticed this guy had dropped off. And he was one of the guys who would post several times a day in that particular forum, and later I figured out that you know, this guy hadn't been on for a while, and I feared the worst. So, you know, we kind of tracked down his phone. I had his phone number, I just didn't have it on speed dial. And got a hold of him and found out that, you know, really bad stuff had happened. It turned out that he actually did have a heart attack and a stroke. He was in a hospital for 3 weeks. While he was in a hospital, somebody who knew him locally went and looted his house. They cleaned him out, and you know, he lived more or less alone. You know, he thought he had good enough standing in a neighborhood that people respected him, which they probably did. But his problem was they expected him to die, and that nobody would be the wiser that they went and they looted his house and cleaned his shit out. And you know, the guy was a good prepper. He had his MREs, he had his garden, he had his tools, he had all his stuff. What he didn't have was good people close by. And like a lot of us, his best friends were hundreds and thousands of miles away. And I don't mean hundreds of thousands of miles. I mean like either a couple hundred miles away or 1,000 miles away on the other coast. And but this guy lived more like, I think, in Arkansas. And so he gets out of the hospital and comes home to find out that pretty much everything's gone. And they even emptied out his fridge, his freezer. It took a lot of furniture. Of course, they took all the guns and ammo they could get a hold of. He had a safe with a small number of guns in there. But what happened is, because it's easy to go shopping for guns and ammo, he didn't secure everything as well as it probably should have been. And no matter how well you secure something, you also run into a situation that people can, you know, they can break locks. I mean, especially if they're doing it at their leisure. And it goes into one of the most important lessons that most survivalists and preppers don't learn, which is quality of people is critically important. And I would almost go so far as to say that if you surround yourself with the right quality of people, a lot of the other prep stuff is going to start taking care of itself. Okay, it really can. As long as you're in a right wavelength, the same sheet of music, people are kind of thinking the right way on that, and they have good personal character, and they have a concept of good personal character. And I'm not talking about the self-righteous judgmentalism that tends to happen with highly politically polarized people, okay? And I'm going to say this, that people who are far right, far left, who choose to have somebody else define their concept of what's politically correct, whether it's conservative or you know, progressive, if you even want to call it that, but I don't. But you might have figured out I come from a generally conservative background. However, you know, a lot of the so-called true believers would call me a leftist. That's one of the reasons. One of the other prepper types, was a North prepper, Yankee prepper or something. left kind of a threatening message in the content section of my page. And I left it up there, you know, to show we're not all going to be on the same sheet of music. We're not all going to get along. Just because somebody's ideologically saying the right things doesn't mean you're on the same team. And so what happened to my friend in Arkansas, somebody went and cleaned out his house, and nobody owned up to it. It was probably somebody local who knew him, and somebody who would probably tell everybody else they were a friend. And, you know, now the guy's hurting. You know, he's in a hospital bed in his place, where he's been cleaned out. Insurance is covering a little bit. But, you know, there wasn't a good enough backup plan to handle a situation when a personal disaster hit. And, you know, in this whole lifestyle that we promote, and I've been kind of in this thing a little while, okay? But one of the most difficult and important things is coordinating it with the right quality people. And one of the things that comes up a lot is when you're different places on a social economic ladder, what is really going to determine the class of people you deal with. And generally speaking, the common assumption is that upper class social economic people have a better character than lower class people. And I would have to agree that's mostly true, but we know of so many exceptions to that, so many successful predators who manage to get themselves into the upper classes of society, but they're still predators. They're still really just opportunistic predators that we know there's a hell of a lot of exceptions to that rule. And when you're in a prepper lifestyle, it can, because a lot of people are putting resources into, let's say, accomplishing personal freedom, sometimes at the expense of accomplishing personal wealth. For example, guys that are going out, I'm leaving work a lot to go work on some survival retreat places where, you know, maybe I could be staying in town and making more money. I don't know. I work on an on-call basis. I'm not always making money. Right now I'm not. I've had kind of a shitty week. And it's Monday of another week, and I'm still not getting a lot of calls. So I don't know what's going on. But, you know, I'm sure it'll have an upturn. We had a little weather improvement here. But, you know, this friend of mine, they went and they ripped off his guns, they ripped off his MREs, they ripped off his groceries, his furniture, all that stuff, because he had a personal disaster. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Even coming out of the hospital, he's in no condition to fight. He's barely in any condition to even take care of himself, and there's not people around him. And that's where, I hate to say it, because there's some people who have accused me of being a communist, but the fact is, you have to have some level of community with people who can take care of you when something happens. And if you don't have that, or if push come to shove and you know for a fact that the people who are closest to you wouldn't really be there for you, you're around the wrong people locally, and you need to get mobile, okay? You need to not be so sentimentally attached to you being the island someplace that you know, you got to make realistic choices on these things. And if you don't, other people are going to make realistic choices for themselves, which are to your detriment. So, folks, if there's one lesson you really got to take from a lot of guys, a lot of the other prepper channels talk about it, but I look at the viewer counts on their videos, and I'm just not sure if it's sinking in. But you got to coordinate with people, and you got to eventually look at how things go down and kind of make those character judgments on who you're going to associate with and allow in your fold. And who, you know, people got to keep an eye on people. I mean, it was over a month after the fact before we really figured out this guy was gone from a forum. And probably should have been keeping track of our friends a little better than that. You know, to find out this guy was in a hospital, his computer was stolen, that's why he wasn't posting anymore. He really needed our help. And we're going to mobilize some help for the guy with what we can. But man, I don't know what to say. You know, you got to be able to coordinate with people. And I know in my life that when I've tried to coordinate with people, there were people who rejected me outright because for whatever reason I didn't meet their standards as what they felt was, you know, going to be a proper person to associate with. You know, up to and including people who would threaten me, or people who would call the police on me. Somebody who would go knocking on a door at the BATF building and say, hey, this guy had this, this, and that. You know, what do you pay me to go help bust him? That was done. Okay, that was done. And the quality of people, man, you got to be careful about who you associate with. But the other thing is within, you know, we're developing community in this whole survivalist prepper thing. And there are definitely predators around, and we need to find out who they are, and, you know, we need to hurt them. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it. They need to get hurt. They need to know that our kind of people are not the kind of people you're going to do the opportunistic predator thing, and then, you know, like go hide behind the police when you've done it, okay? And, you know, robbing a guy's house when he's in the hospital, you know, I don't know all of what the situation was with his local contacts. I could say that they sure as fuck didn't handle business, and they sure as hell weren't good at taking care of the guy. And it also means developing a lifestyle where, you know, you could develop the time to handle things for friends and family. Because if all you're doing is running that rat race treadmill, working overtime, and you really can't go and help a friend or a family member who's had a personal disaster and help take care of a few things, you're still doing wrong, okay? Because it's not going to lead to survival. If you're only ready for shit hit the fan and can't help out some people, friends, family, church, when something happens like that, then, you know, it's a fuck up, okay? It's not going to be right. And you need to straighten that stuff out. Because, you know, obviously predatory, opportunistic people are going to look for good people to victimize. I mean, that's what they really do. That's what con artists do. They look for somebody who wants to be a good, helpful person. And in the whole therapeutic world, they have a word for that. They call that codependent. Okay, they're looking for a codependent to exploit. And you don't want to be that codependent to be exploit. That's why you look for people of your own kind to associate and coordinate with, so that you can be a real self-supporting group with your kind of people. And as you develop these groups, they need to become a community, and as it becomes a community, a group of communities then becomes the movement, and eventually can even establish its own nation, which is what was done here, you know, a couple hundred years ago. It has to be done, folks. You don't want the little disasters like sickness or some other kind of thing to wipe you out like it did this friend of mine. And you got to coordinate with people. You know, I'm ashamed of the fact that I didn't notice a month ago that this guy was off the forum, but the reality is we had no way of contacting him while he was in a hospital. And we're all hundreds of miles away that we weren't able to go check up and make sure everything's cool. And maybe he didn't fully trust his online friends as much as he trusts the local people, as he got ripped off by the local people. And you have to, you know, we have to figure out a better way to run this. We really do. We got to figure out a better way to make sure that our kinds of people aren't going to be constantly the victim of things like this. And I'm open to suggestions, okay? You know, some kind of a coordination network, I don't know what, but it's got to be done.